Norway is a pretty awesome country. It's known for its extremely social policies, skiing, and eating rotten fish. What's not to love? All jokes aside, I really love Norway. I lived there for a while and even completed my secondary education there. It's a beautiful country with very progressive policies and a great attitude towards work-life balance. I remember my dad talking in awe about how normal it is to tell your colleagues that you'll have to leave at 3 p.m. to pick up your kid from soccer practice. But that is a story for another time. We all know the pressure of entering your last year of high school. It's a magical time of endless possibilities and endless ways to fail. And nothing is worse than when every encounter with an adult leads to the same question: what are you going to study? And with that comes a whole catalog of follow-ups about which country, city, university you'll end up in. But even as a starry-eyed teenager, you know that you can't just pick and choose a destination. Countries vary widely in the cost of tertiary education. Coming from Germany myself, the idea of having to pay a tuition fee is crazy. Growing up in a system where the education itself is for free and the state supports students whose parents cannot provide the financial aid necessary to cover the cost of living, the idea of having to pay tens of thousands of dollars in tuition per year is just outlandish. Of course, the US is the main example here. For 2022, the most expensive university is Harvey Mudd College, with a whopping $80,000 of tuition fees for 1 year of studying. In fact, out of the 25 most expensive universities in the world, the US proudly takes the top 10 for itself. So clearly, for many students, studying in the US is not an option. But what was amazing to me was that for many of my Norwegian classmates, the financial consideration was not just what their parents were prepared to cover, but also factoring in what they were getting from the state, no matter the economic situation of the family. This was a concept that was entirely new to me. How is this possible? Well, the title of this video will have tipped you off, with the Norwegian Oil Fund. Welcome to Rebel Economics, where we discuss exciting topics from the world of business and economics. If you enjoy our content, like and subscribe, we really do appreciate it. So today, we will look at the Norwegian Oil Fund, where it came from, and what it is being spent on and how it is invested. In the 50s, very few people believed that there were any significant amount of petroleum in the Norwegian continental shelf, but the discovery of gas deposits in the Netherlands in 1959 made it increasingly likely. 10 years later, a large oil field was found, and more were discovered in the following years. In the early 60s, it was already established that the government had sovereignty over the Norwegian continental shelf, and with that, all the natural resources discovered within it. In addition to the already existing government pension fund Norway, the large findings of oil in 1969 inspired the creation of a new government pension fund global. This is the one that is typically thought of when speaking of the Norwegian Oil Fund. The second fund would be invested globally. Currently, the fund is at around 12 trillion Norwegian kroner, equivalent to about $1.2 trillion. In 1972, Statoil, the Norwegian state-owned oil company, was established. The government also introduced the principle that 50% of each oil license should be state-owned. In the 1980s, political discourse questioned this arrangement, as Statoil's cash flow was becoming very large in relation to Norway's gross national product. The solution was splitting Statoil's ownership, and the state's direct financial interest, or SDFI, was created. Statoil's original ownership was divided in two, with approximately 20% retained by Statoil itself, and the rest given to SDFI. With partial privatization in the early 2000s, this arrangement changed once more, and a new state-owned managed company, Petoro, was created to manage the SDFI. During all these years, since the late 60s, a huge amount of wealth flowed from the oil companies to the Norwegian government and its oil funds. But instead of rolling in the cash like Scrooge McDuck, the Norwegian government decided to use a cautious approach to try to keep economic imbalances to a minimum. So instead, it was set up to be a sort of national piggy bank, to be used in bad times and for future generations. It has made Norway a major economic, ethical, and environmental powerhouse. So let's see where all this cash is going. In short, the fund exists to help finance the Norwegian welfare state for future generations. Norway has a very extensive welfare state, with free education, free healthcare, and individual grants and concessions for disabled and unemployed persons. Just as an example, I want to go back to what I mentioned in my little anecdote earlier: financing tertiary education. Firstly, tuition fees are covered up to 69,000 kroner per year, being the equivalent of about $7,000. In addition to that, the basic amount for living expenses are added, which comes to nearly 130,000 kroner. In dollars, that would be just over $13,000 per year. That means you have just over $1,000 per month given to you by the state, regardless of your family's economic situation. Now, it's true that in Norway the living expenses are quite high. This is true for literally everything, from housing to food, and especially products that are considered unhealthy, like alcohol and tobacco. But it's still a pretty good deal, and makes for a really cushy living arrangement. In addition to that, you could apply for additional support, for example, if you have children, are disabled, or study when you're over 30 years old. This money is split up into grants and loans. The grants are for free and do not need to be paid back, whereas the loans are money that you have to repay with interest at a later date. But the interest only kicks in once you have completed your education. Furthermore, the Norwegian Student Loan Agency allows you to convert up to 40% of loans received for higher education into grants. In order to be able to convert a loan into a grant, you must not be living with your parents, you must qualify successfully, and your income and wealth must be below a given threshold. So if you're fresh out of university, you can actually take that first job because you're still an idealist, because you don't have to worry about paying back a tremendous amount of loans, plus interest immediately. The usual repayment rate is 20 years. I don't want to go into all of the welfare schemes offered by Norway in such great detail, but especially for me, this was very impressive at a time when I had to figure out which places I would be able to afford, and that is with the support of my parents. Just to give some more examples of how Norway supports its citizens with cash from the oil fund, I just want to give some examples, so here we go. All Norwegians receive free medical care in hospitals, compensation for doctors' fees, and free medicine, as well as an allowance to compensate for lost wages. This also covers benefits for long-term illnesses or pregnancy. There's also a well-developed system of maternal and child health care, as well as compulsory schoolhouse services and free family counseling by professionals. A public dental service provides care for children under the age of 18. The fund also takes care of the senior citizens with a so-called people's pension. It ensures each citizen, upon retirement, a standard of living reasonably close to the level that the individual had achieved during his or her working life. This is being revisited every year to adjust for inflation, regardless of the plan's income. For now, I want to leave it here and look towards how the fund is invested, because while the government spends a lot of money on the extensive welfare state, the fiscal rule is that they cannot spend more than the expected return of the fund. In that way, only the fund's return is spent, but never the actual capital of the fund itself. With that in mind, let's look how it is invested to continue to grow at such incredible rates. The oil fund is very important for Norway's economy. For one, because it is a significant shock absorber and means Norway's economy is not at the mercy of the global oil price. And for another, because although revenue from oil and gas production is transferred to the fund, these deposits account for less than half of the value of the fund. Most of it has been earned by investing in equities, fixed income, real estate, and renewable energy infrastructure. Look at that growth in the past 25 years. With the first payment to the fund being made in 1996, it has not just grown due to further revenue being put in, but you can see how the money really started to work for itself. Nowadays, Norway owns around 1.4% of global stocks and shares through their government pension fund Global. The investments are split across four main sectors: equity investments, fixed income investments, real estate investments, and renewable energy infrastructure. The major one here is equity, with a whopping 72% of the fund being invested this way. So while the oil fund has done incredibly well so far, it is not immune to the overall stock market, having so much invested in it. So the growth we see is not guaranteed, and with the potential of an oncoming recession, it is in fact becoming more and more likely. In fact, in the graph we see some years where the line stagnates, like in 2015, or even went down, like in 2017. Interestingly though, thinking back to the economic crisis of 2008 and the following years, The oil funds still continue to grow, despite the rest of the world having been plunged in financial uncertainty. The second largest type of investment, with 25.4%, is fixed income investment, followed by 2.5% real estate. That leaves only 0.1% for renewable energy infrastructure, which it only started to actively invest in through the oil funds in 2021. Of course, the Norwegian government also invests in renewable energy in other ways, apart from the oil fund, in order to reduce their own reliance on fossil fuels. In fact, 98% of the electricity produced in Norway stems from renewable energy sources, hydropower being the most popular one. Norway has declared that it will invest around $1 billion over 5 years toward renewable energy investments in developing countries. But more than just a money-making machine, the fund is also aimed at being invested sustainably, being aligned with society's broader expectations of companies. As such, there is an independent council on ethics, which can make recommendations on whether a company should be excluded from the investment due to ethical concerns. Several examples of companies no longer making the ethical cut are, for example, the British American Tobacco Ltd, with a $683 million investment being divested in 2010 for the production of tobacco. The Rio Tinto Group, a British-Australian mining giant, saw a $882 million divestment in 2008 due to severe environmental damage. And Walmart, the behemoth American multinational retail chain, saw a $372 million divestment in 2006 for breach of labor and human rights. Today, we learn a lot about Norwegian Oil Fund and how it is not just sustaining the Norwegian welfare state, but has become an investment powerhouse. With investments in 69 countries, a diverse portfolio has been created in order to absorb any shocks that may come from the oil market. Even without new infusions of funds from Norwegian oil and gas, the fund will survive for many generations to come, as only the revenues are needed to provide for the welfare state. At least this is the case if the government continues to follow its current policy. I hope you enjoyed this insight into the Norwegian Oil Fund and it helped you understand how it can afford all the wonderful free education and healthcare we talked about. If you enjoyed today's video, please like and subscribe. It is really important to us so we can see which videos and content you like best and we can make more of it. By now, we have accumulated a ton of videos. If you enjoy the politics mixed into economics, check out why you might say that we buy our votes. Or check out the asymmetric information economics, because knowledge truly is power, and money. Thanks for watching guys, and see you soon!